It's minus 30 degrees Celsius. Your breath freezes before it hits the air. There's no shop, no heater, no rescue helicopter, just you, a dying fire, and 800 kilometers of open tundra in every direction. This is where our ancestors lived. Not for a week, for thousands of years. And somehow, they didn't just survive it, they thrived. Here's the problem. The human body is built for Africa, not Siberia. No natural fur, a thin fat layer. At minus 30, exposed skin can freeze in under 10 minutes. By the rules of physics, an unprotected human here should die in hours. But 20,000 years ago, people didn't just endure this landscape. They raised children here. They built permanent settlements here. And it wasn't luck. It was engineering. Some of the most advanced survival technology in human history. Let's take it apart. Piece by piece. The fire itself. You'd think any fire keeps you warm. It doesn't. An open flame loses most of its heat straight up, wasted into the sky. Ice Age engineers fixed that. At Dolní Věstonice, in the modern Czech Republic, archaeologists found hearths lined with stone and shaped into basins, built to reflect heat sideways, into the living space, instead of losing it upward. Some were dug as shallow pits with sloped walls, acting almost like a satellite dish for warmth. And this wasn't guesswork. The same design shows up again and again across generations. A technology refined and taught, not stumbled into once. There's also a stranger twist. On the open tundra, wood was scarce. So people burned bone instead. Mammoth-bone, rich enough in fat to fuel a fire almost like a candle. And the very same hearths that kept families alive also fired the oldest ceramic objects ever discovered. Figurines baked over 25,000 years ago, long before anyone else on Earth was making pottery. Heat wasn't just survival. It was humanity's first chemistry lab. But even the smartest fire couldn't help you outside the shelter, so the next question was brutal. How do you survive 50 below wind chill while you're out there hunting? Clothing engineering? Forget the single-hide caveman image. That's not what this was. Real Ice Age clothing was a multi-layer system, closer to modern Arctic gear than anything in the movies. The breakthrough tool was tiny, an eyed needle carved from bone or ivory, some no thicker than a toothpick. That needle changed everything, because it meant clothing could be tailored, cut, and fitted, instead of just draped and tied. Tailored clothes trap a layer of warm air against the skin. Draped fur doesn't. That's the difference between comfort and hypothermia. Wear patterns on needles from sites like Kostenki and cord impressions pressed into fired clay at Pavlov tell us people were sewing fitted parkas, layered leggings, even weaving nets and bags. A genuine textile industry, tens of thousands of years before farming existed. They even solved waterproofing. Sinew thread swells when wet, sealing the needle holes shut. None of this was random. It was applied physics, discovered by trial generations before anyone had a word for thermodynamics. Clothing solved the body, but there's a bigger problem waiting. Out here, there are no caves, no forests, no timber. So where do you even build a shelter? Building with bone. At Mezhyrich in Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered something almost hard to believe. Houses built entirely from mammoth bones. Not decoration, structural engineering. Builders stacked mammoth skulls and jawbones into interlocking rings, used tusks as roof beams, and long bones as bracing, then stretched hides over the frame for insulation. One dwelling could use the remains of 20 or more mammoths, each skull weighing close to 100 kilograms. That's load-bearing architecture, built to resist wind with zero timber available. And it wasn't a one-off. Several of these bone houses stood clustered together, evidence of a semi-permanent settlement reused across seasons, maybe across generations. Raising one required serious teamwork, sorting and stacking tons of bone using only stone tools and manpower. This is the exact moment survival stops being a personal skill and becomes a group logistics project. But raising a mammoth bone village takes more than muscle. It takes trust, and trust needed its own kind of technology, one that had nothing to do with fire, fur, or bone, the information network. At Sungir in Russia, archaeologists found a burial unlike almost anything else from this era. 2 children, laid head to head, covered in roughly 10,000 ivory beads. Each bead took an estimated 30 to 45 minutes to carve by hand. Do the math, and that single burial represents thousands of hours of collective labor, an entire community's time, poured into two graves. That's not just grief, that's a signal. It tells us these societies had status, ritual, and social bonds strong enough to justify enormous shared investment. And those bonds had a survival function. Shell ornaments, amber, and high-quality flint have been found hundreds of kilometers from their natural source, passed hand to hand across the tundra through what researchers call exchange networks. In a world where one bad hunting season could wipe out a group, having distant allies who'd take you in was as valuable as any fire or fur coat. Trade and ritual weren't luxuries. They were insurance policies, written in beads and stone instead of paper. Here's the detail that still surprises researchers most. Genetic evidence from clothing lice, yes, lice, suggests humans were wearing tailored clothing as early as 170,000 years ago, tens of thousands of years before our species even left Africa. Which means everything you just watched, the reflective hearths, the tailored layers, the bone architecture, the trade networks, wasn't a rushed reaction to the cold. It was the payoff of technology that had already been quietly evolving for generations, just waiting for a landscape harsh enough to prove exactly how far it could go. And if you want to see where these same principles, insulation, radiant heat, load-bearing bone, show up again thousands of years later in early civilizations, that video's linked right here. It might change how you look at every primitive technology you thought you understood.